So what we're doing today is we're covering spread F. So last class, if you remember, we were going through what is social psychology. We were looking at the different ways in which we make social judgments. And now we're moving to the next topic in social psychology, which is social power. Okay. And we're looking at this idea of what is the meaning of social power? What is the meaning of social influence? What does it mean when one person can influence another person? Okay. So that's the basic gist of what we're covering today. Before we look at the different types of social power, and before we look at an experiment that was conducted to show us the power of power, I guess, we need to understand what social influence is. Okay, we need to understand this idea that, you could be someone who has a social influence on another person. Okay, that, groups of people can have social influences on other groups of people. So a social influence is literally an effect. Okay, it's an effect. It's usually due to either the presence of a person or due to the actions of a person. Sometimes just the mere presence of someone can make an environment change. For example, if we're having a normal class and the coordinator walks into the room or the principal walks into the room, it's going to change the entire aura or the entire vibe of that classroom, in the sense that people are less likely to misbehave because of that presence of that person who has authority or who has power. Okay, sometimes it's the action. So we usually see this in things like bullying, where someone will try to intimidate another person, or where a group of people may try to pressure another person to do something, as we see in peer pressure. That's what we mean by the actions of other people. Okay, sometimes social influences are real, in the sense that they're actually real. Other people can see this little boy being pressured, or they're imagined. Okay, imagined means that you kind of make it up in your head, and it's not that someone is intimidating you, but you kind of make it out to be that they are intimidating you, or you kind of build up and jump to conclusions in your own head without any real evidence there. Okay, but again, an imagined social influence can still cause you to maybe not say things, to maybe not do things. So it can still have that effect as any other social influence would. The most important characteristic of a social influence is that power that is exerted by the actions of the other person, or by the presence of the other person, can impact your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Okay, the most common example is if your coordinator walks into the room and it's just about, period 1, 10 minutes into period 1, you are most likely going to be thinking that, oh my God, have they come for uniform check? Okay, if you're not in the correct uniform, you might be feeling a bit anxious. You might be feeling a bit worried. Behavior, you might start to slump down in your seat so that they might not come and check on you. Or you might try, if you're wearing the wrong jacket, you might try to quickly slip your jacket off and put it on the chair so that they might not see that. Okay, so that's the basic idea, in the fact that a social influence can affect your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Sometimes not all three, sometimes it's just your thoughts or feelings, but in one way or the other, they do influence these three aspects there. Another thing to notice about social influences is that they can be constructive or positive. Okay, they can be destructive as well. The best example of a destructive social or negative social influence is things like being peer pressured to engage in activities that are harmful, being pressured to bully someone. Okay, usually when there's a group that bully another people, maybe not all members of that group want to bully that person, but they feel pressured to by the rest of the group. So those are negative social influences. Positive social influences, if, for example, you're with a group of people who want to do something good. Okay, you see a homeless man or homeless woman in the city, and you're like, okay, guys, let's pull some money together and give it to him, or let's buy him a meal. That's a positive social influence because it's causing you to do something good. Okay. Neutral social influences are when the social influence doesn't have much of an effect. Usually we see neutral social influences with people that we don't know very well. Okay. And that's the basic idea, because when you don't know someone really well, or you have a kind of ambiguous relationship with them where it's not like they're really close to you, but it's not like they hate you, that's basically a neutral social influence. It doesn't have an effect on you. Okay. Now, in terms of how we respond to social influences, remember, social influence is just about power. Okay, it's just about power. The amount of social influence you have over someone is about the amount of power you have over someone. Okay, and just like in school, you've got, sometimes you've got really strict teachers, and sometimes you've got teachers who are a little bit more laid back. Just like in any workplace, you've got managers who are really laid back, managers who are really strict. But just because we've got those two different environments, it doesn't mean that every student gives in to a demand or request that the teacher asks of them. It's not like every employee in a workplace gives in to every single order or command that they're given, that they are given. Okay. In the same thing that, you know, not everyone will resist a social influence. Some people are more prone to actually abiding and actually listening to authority figures. Okay. It depends on your personality as well. So whether we, with reference to social influences, we can either choose to give in, okay, and accept, or we can choose to resist, which means to go against. Okay, that's the basic, just giving you some basic introductory information into what social influences are. Okay, so hopefully if you guys are clear on what social influences are, it's just about the effect of someone and basically how they, how the power they have over you influences your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Now we're going to look at what is a group. So we mentioned the word group a few times in the previous slide, talking about the fact that certain groups can have power or can wield power over other groups. What is a group and how would we define a group in the context of psychology? We need to remember that there are three main kind of key features of a group, okay? In order for a bunch of people to be classified or qualified to be a group. Number one, or the first kind of tick box that we need to kind of, you know, qualify is a group is a collection of two or more people. That's your first criteria, okay? You can't have a group with just like one person. That's not a group, okay? That's just common sense. It's also a collection of people who interact with and influence one another, okay? So that's the second one, and who share a common purpose. That's the third one. Okay, so these are the three main key features of a group. So for example, if I walk into a class, you know, or someone walks into our class and, you know, we're all working on a question on the board together, or most of us are working on it together, others are maybe taking down notes, that's still a collection of two or more people who are interacting with and influencing one another and who share a common purpose of trying to solve the question. Okay, so we can still say that that might be classified to be a group. However, if I walk into a class and let's say there's just maybe 6 or 7 different students and they're all doing different subjects and they're just kind of studying on their own, just doing their questions in their book, they're not really talking to each other, even though we can say that the people in that class are more than 2 people, that it's a group, that this first criteria is fulfilled, they're not actually interacting with each other, are they? They're not actually sharing a common purpose, because one kid is studying maths, one kid is studying biology, one kid studying psychology. It's like they all have a different purpose there and they're not really interacting with and influencing one another. So you need to be able to, in a scenario kind of question, if you're given this in the test for this particular topic, you need to be able to determine whether a scenario is showing a group of people as our definition, or whether it's not a group. So for example, in these photos here, you can see these 3 people look like they're colleagues from work, maybe on a lunch break. Okay, they seem like they're talking to each other. They seem like they have a common purpose, okay, of going to get a coffee or going to get lunch. So they are a group. Okay. This particular group of people look like they're at a sports match. They're all kind of wearing the same color. They're kind of standing next to each other. Okay, and they look like they're there for the same purpose. So they are a group. The same thing with the classroom example, that is a group. But for example, people standing on the platform at Flinders Street Station, okay, if they're not talking to one another, they're kind of just on their phones, someone's reading a newspaper there, okay, they're just kind of waiting for the train. So yeah, they share the common purpose, but they're not a group because they're not interacting or influencing with one another. So we'd put a cross there. We'd say that these guys are not a group. The same thing with this group of people in an elevator. Okay, even though they're sharing the common purpose of using the elevator, they're not interacting and influencing one another. So that's kind of the key thing that does not make them a group. Okay, so you need to be able to evaluate it like that. Cool. So hopefully you guys remember, if we ever ask you to define a group, you need to give these 3 aspects. Okay, so just make sure you remember those 3 key features or qualifying factors or criteria there. Okay, now we're looking at status and power. So I think all of us know what status is. Status is, can anyone give me just one word, just a general word that you think best describes the word status? Or give me an example of someone who you think has status. So maybe we'll start, yeah, with one word that best describes. So where you stand, I have status, okay. A role in society, yeah. So all of those are really good examples of what status is about. Status is literally about your position or where you stand, what your role, what your position is. Okay, that's the basic idea. So Status refers to the importance of an individual's position. And remember, status is something that like we can't really say I have status, even though I can say, oh yeah, as a teacher, I have status. I can't really determine that for myself. Okay. That's only something that can be determined by members of the group. Okay. That's the important thing to remember, that your status is really determined upon what the other members of the group give you. So if anyone has watched Mean Girls, for example, that movie, in that movie, Regina George has status only because the rest of her group kind of, give her that status. They give her that power. Okay, but the minute that Katie comes into the picture, they stop giving her that status, and Katie kind of becomes kind of like the leader of the group after that. Okay, so again, status is determined by other members of the group. So that's the important thing to remember. Also, the amount of status that you have can influence the number of the amount of power that you have as well. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Power. Now, we realize the relationship between status and power, that the higher your status is, the higher your power is. Yeah. Okay. When we're talking about power, okay, or social power, which are basically the same thing, it's basically your ability to control or influence the thoughts, feelings, or behavior of another person or a group of people. Okay. In other words, how can someone change the way someone thinks, change the way someone feels, or change the way someone behaves? A really recent example and common example of this is with Daniel Andrews. We know that he's the Premier of Victoria. In the beginning, when he was asking everyone to get vaccinated, it didn't really, a lot of people were hesitant, but once he kind of buckled down on it and kept kind of saying, okay, yes, we have to meet the targets, people were very much kind of like easily swayed or kind of very easily influenced by what he was saying. Obviously, there was a lot of other stuff going on behind the scenes as well that made us succumb and made us want to vaccinate ourselves. And most of us, probably not everyone in this world is anti-vax as well at the same time, but we have to realize that he has that power. He had the ability to control, okay, all the citizens of Victoria. He had that ability to influence our behavior in that aspect, to go and get vaccinated. And as we know, each day the vaccination rates are going up. But yeah, he had that power, okay? In the same way, at school, a specific group of people might have the ability to influence your thoughts, feelings, and behavior as well, okay? Social power is not a separate definition. It's literally the same definition as normal power, the usual power definition, but it's just when the power is involved in a social interaction. Okay, so it's the same definition, but we're just applying it to an actual social interaction, like bumping into someone in the corridor or seeing someone outside of school, just like an actual social engagement or social interaction there. Okay, so these two don't need to be learned as separate definitions, but it's just there to differentiate between the two. Okay, so that's basically the relationship between status and power. Okay, now we're looking at the types of power. So we have to remember that social power is any type of power or control or influence that a person has in a social situation or in a social interaction. So we've got 6 different types of power that we need to learn. You can use the memory tip RICE LR. I know it's a bit of a weird memory tip, but just remember RICE and then an LR. I don't know. You can make a better memory tip, I suppose. But yeah, that's about it. Or you can go RICE left, right. So L for left, R for right. I don't know, something like that. So that's the basic idea. Okay, there are 6 types of social power. You need to know each of the names of them. Most importantly, if we give you a scenario-based question, you need to be able to identify what type of power the person in that scenario has. Okay, as we go through the definitions for these types of power, this will make a lot more sense. Now, the other thing to remember is that different types of social power can be used at the same time. Okay, I'll elaborate on this point when we look at the actual definitions, but it's not just like, oh, I'm a teacher, I only have one type of power. I might have different types of power at the same time. Or if you're talking about someone like a policeman probably has more than one type of power at the same time as well. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So we're going to look at the definitions of these types of power now. So when we're looking at reward power is, I'm just going to simplify the definitions rather than just reading them from the PowerPoint. So reward power in simple words is the ability of someone to give out something positive or give out a reward to another person. Okay, not everyone has reward power and not everyone is influenced by reward power. For example, if your mum came up to you and said, oh, can you please, put the clothes in the washing machine, put them out to dry and then fold them. I'll give you I'll give you $2. Okay. And then you're like, $2 doesn't seem like it's worth it. But if they said the same thing to your little brother or sister in primary school, they might actually help your parent. They might actually want to do it because $2 is a lot to them. Maybe. Okay. So again, your mum doesn't have reward power over you, but she has reward power over your younger siblings. Okay. In the same way as a teacher, if I was teaching in a primary school or if I was a primary school teacher, I might actually have reward power over my students and be able to say, oh, I have a sticker, if everyone does their work, I'll give you a sticker. Okay. But I have tried this in secondary. I have tried this with VCE. It doesn't work. Okay. So obviously reward power is not a thing for VCE, I guess. Okay. Shouldn't be, but it depends on the reward. If it's a chocolate, sometimes people are more bend a little more to that rather than a sticker. Okay, so that's the basic idea. You can give any of these examples. An employer, okay, if you do part-time work, your employer or your manager has the power to give you a rise in your pay. Okay, teachers can reward students with extra points. Sometimes we say, okay, if you finish the style activities, we'll give you 1 extra point on the test. Okay, that's reward power. Okay, coercive power is this idea that it's the opposite of reward power. And it's a little bit difficult to remember because a lot of the time we don't know what the word coercive means off the top of our heads. Coercive is literally, it has a negative connotation. It just means that you are coercing someone to do something or you're kind of forcing them to do something. So coercive power is basically this idea of, it's the power that you have to give out punishments. Okay, it's the opposite of reward power. Okay, so for example, it's the same kind of examples you can talk about. Just like an employer has the power to give a pay rise or promotion, which is reward power, they also have the ability to dismiss an employee. Okay, to demote. Demote is the opposite of promote, to actually bring down an employee 1 level. Okay, a teacher has the power to give demerits. Okay, we have the power to give detention. We have the power to email parents. So all of these are types of punishments that teachers can have over students. So those are just the opposite. These two are just the opposite of each other. So if you know one, you kind of automatically know the other as well. Okay, moving on, when we look at legitimate power is power that we would say is kind of like legit or it's genuine. Okay, so essentially we're talking about like, these are the people in society who you don't even have to know a lot about them, but just them appearing up in society makes you like, oh, that person's there, they've got power, I've got to listen to them. The most common example that we know is police. Okay, when we see the police, generally people's behavior automatically changes. Okay, a lot of people have this anxiety just by the side of a policeman or policewoman. Okay, so there are also others that you can talk about, for example, a manager or your year level coordinators or principal, for example. If you're a part of a sports team, the captain of a team or the coach, a classroom teacher, okay, all of these can have legitimate power. Legitimate power in very simple words is defined as an individual's basic position in society that basically gives them a high status, allowing them to thus rule over people with a lower status or who don't have as much authority. So we know police generally have more authority and status, so they're able to kind of rule over those who have less status. Okay, referent power. Referent comes from the word refer. Okay, and refer is like someone you refer back to. Okay, referent power is usually associated with the kind of power that a person has when they know that others like them or want to be like them. Okay, so we're talking about like maybe like celebrities. We're talking about it doesn't have to be celebrities, though. It can even be someone like, for example, someone popular in school. Okay, or someone that you look up to who has achieved something you want to achieve. So that's what referent power is, someone you refer back to or look up to and want to be like, and the kind of power they have over you. So for example, Ariana's fans might, if she posts like a picture of a specific, I don't know, smoothie or something that she drinks on her Instagram, her followers might actually, want to buy that as well, or they might post comments like, oh, what's the link? I want to purchase it too, or something like that. Okay, so that's what referent power is. Expert power is just in the name itself. It's having some kind of specialization or expertise or knowledge or skills because you've studied that topic for a very long period of time, or longer than at least most other people have. So we're talking about people like, for example, a lecturer. Okay, a lot of the time when COVID was at its peak, on TV, you would see like people coming onto these talk shows and news segments, and they'd have titles like infectious disease specialist or professor in epidemiology. So these are people who have studied maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, so many years in their particular field, and they've got so much expert power, or they've got so much special knowledge and skills that are required for a specific task. Okay, for example, a classroom teacher, you know, your biology teacher, your psychology teacher, chemistry teacher, whatever subject it is, they have studied in that field for a bit of time, more than another teacher has. So they are able to give you some kind of special knowledge and skills in that subject. Okay. Informational power is the last one we're looking at. Informational power is a little bit different from what's it called? Expert power. So don't get these two mixed up. Okay. Expert power is special knowledge or skills in a specific area. We could even say in a specific subject or domain. Informational power is not like you having to complete like a PhD in biology to teach biology, but it's more like information in terms of general information that you have. For example, let's say that you're practicing for a national level basketball competition or something like that, or let's say national level debating competition. If you don't really have anyone in your school who has gone to that level, but you know of a family friend, or you know of a cousin or someone who has gone to that level, you might talk to them because they have information about like the best possible tips, the best possible advice to give you about what you can expect, about what you can do. Okay, a lot of you who might have older brothers or sisters who have already done VCE, they act as a source of informational power for you because they have information, they've been through it themselves, and they can give you that information through the experience that they've had, through general life experience, as opposed to completing like a PhD or a master's degree in a field, which is more to do with expert power. Okay, that's the difference between the two. Someone who's pregnant for the first time might speak to a friend who's already got 3 kids and ask them, okay, when you had your first kid, how were things? What can I expect? And then that friend has informational power over them. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Okay, so you need to know one example. So you need to know the definition, brief definition for each one, and then one example or 2 examples for each example then. Okay. Okay, so I know it's a little bit content heavy, but like I said, not much we can do about that in psychology. Okay, but if you're having any doubts about any of the types of power, just feel free to let me know. Okay, now we're looking at the actual experiment. So this is an actual experiment that was conducted. There's been a movie that's been made on it. I don't know if you watched it or not. It's called the Stanford Prison Experiment. The movie, obviously, we can't watch in class. Okay, every year people are like, oh, can we watch it in class? No, we can't, because it's definitely not for young students. Okay, it's not, the rating is too high, it's too much violence, too much, you know how it is. So we're not going to watch it in class, but if you want, you can watch it in your free time. It just gives you an idea of what the experiment is, but it is pretty extreme. Anyway, we are going to watch a more classroom friendly video from YouTube about the Stanford Prison Experiment with actual real life footage of what the experiment was and what it involved. Before that, though, I'm just going to give you guys a bit of contextual information about the experiment so the video makes a little more sense. So this experiment was actually conducted by a guy called Zimbardo, or Philip Zimbardo. He was the psychologist that was behind it. Philip Zimbardo thought it would be interesting if he turned the university at which he worked, which was Stanford University in America, if he turned the basement of that university science department into a mock prison. A mock prison basically means a place that's not actually a prison, but just set up to look like a prison. Okay. And then he wanted to recruit 2 types of groups of people. He wanted to have 2 roles. Okay. He wanted half of his participants to be prisoners, okay, and he wanted the other half to be prison guards, okay, or the security guards or whatever you want to call them, okay, and then he basically had those 2 groups in his study, okay. Now, that's all I'm going to tell you because the rest of it will be covered in the video and I don't want to spoil it too much as well. So that's the basic idea. So just think about it. University students, half of them are prisoners, half of them are guards, and what kind of He just wanted to see what would happen, what their social interactions would be like, would their behavior change, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to play the video. Okay, I've already talked about this. We'll come back to this anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to play the video. So just let me share screen. Okay, first thing, I'll pause the recording here. So that was the video that we watched of the Stanford prisoner experiment. So you guys had an idea, you were able to see some real life video footage of what that experiment involved. That experiment was conducted in the 1960s, so a long time ago. But, you know, even today, we still study it when we look at the effect of power on, you know, on people, okay, and the effect of role and status. Zimbardo's aim of that study was to basically try to investigate how the situational factors, so basically how the environment that you're put in affects your personality, okay, as compared to your actual personality or actual disposition. And that's what he was able to see, that all of these people who went into that experiment were healthy male volunteers. None of them had previous psychiatric illnesses or previous history of behavioral conditions. They were just all healthy, but you know, you saw how a lot of them succumbed to that power. You saw how a lot of them had emotional disturbances as a result of being in that study. Okay, so basically it shows us the importance of roles, the importance of social power, and the importance of status. And we can literally draw an arrow between these because they're all interconnected. The role that you have in society determines your status. And the status that you have in society determines the amount of social power you have and over which people you can wield that power. If you're a prison guard, for example, in a prison situation, you've got a pretty big role, you've got a high level of status. And because you've got a high level of status, you are able to boss around the prisoners as much as you like. Okay, that's the basic. And we can relate this back to any social situation or any social role that we see in society. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, there were some issues with the experiment. Okay, this is just the setup and the design. You don't need to worry too much. This was all covered in the video. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. This was also all covered. This is more information for people who like are absent or who don't get a chance to see the video. So I'm just going to skip through both of those. As you can see here, in terms of the behavior, you can see that the orange bars represent the guards and the blue bars represent the prisoners. So you can see that the commands almost, you know, in terms of the commands, you've got all of the commands or almost all of the commands being given by the guards, whereas the prisoners are doing no commands because the prisoners don't have that power to command people around. Okay, almost all the guards are giving the insults there. A few prisoners were trying to insult the guards, but not all of them. Okay, a lot of them became submissive. And yeah, you can see how the different types of behavior manifested themselves in that experiment there. Okay, so that's just some information. You don't need to memorize that bar graph or anything like that, just for your own information there. This is something important though. This slide is talking about the conclusions that we can draw from Zimbardo's study. So this is kind of like, if we're looking at the moral of the study or the moral of the experiment, what can we actually say? We can say that this experiment showed us that the social power that a person has over other people can actually make them go on to act in corrupt, evil, and even inhumane ways. Okay, so this is the moral of the story. Okay, the idea that it's not just about who you are. You might be a really normal kind of person. You might not have any, you know, psychotic tendencies. You might not have any kind of tendencies to be narcissistic or you know, to be a sadistic person, but you being put in a specific situation, you might actually start to show those characteristics. And that's what we saw with the prison guards who were in this experiment. Okay, they came into the experiment as university students, but once they got into their role, they started to become very sadistic and very abusive towards those prisoners. Okay, this GIF that's playing here is just, it's not from the actual study, it's from the movie that was based on the study, but you can see some actual photos here. And I think all of these were shown in the video at some point or the other. Okay, so that's the basic conclusions from Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment. And I think with that, we are done with spread F. So I'm just going to stop the recording here.